Okay, I'm gonna show you all how to make an apple. I'm gonna start with a UV sphere. And before I actually start editing this, I'm gonna simplify it. So down here in segments, I'm going to simplify this object. And it's just gonna make it easier for me to kind of edit these objects. So I'm actually going to go 16 and 12. That looks like a good amount. And it's, again, going to make it easier for us to shape this. So this is slightly different than your mugs because it's a little bit more organic. And so, you know, we can be a little more artistic with this object. So here's my sphere. Again, I have 16 segments and 12 rings, and now I can go to the edit mode. I'm also, notice I'm in front perspective, so I'm going to go to ortho just to see that a little bit more clearly. And I think I want to edit this using just the vertex select. So it's going to be easier, I think, if we do this with just the points. Keep in mind some other settings you want to probably make sure you're paying attention to, your proportional editing mode. Remember, that's gonna make it so that when you edit one point, it's gonna have effect on the points around it. And also, watch this selection, this tool right here, the limit selection to visible. I'm going to turn that off. So you want that light gray. Okay? And so I'm going to start with the top because that's going to be easy. I'm going to just right click on that middle point and I'm going to push that down. This is where the stem is going to go. So I'm going to push that down. Now while I'm pushing that down, I'm going to pay attention to this circle that appears. Notice this big giant circle. This is a little too big, so I'm going to scroll down just to make that smaller. Again, I'm still holding the mouse button down. Notice I'm moving that up and down still, and then I'm scrolling at the same time. So you got to use your index finger and your middle finger to make that work. I want that to push down a little bit. Something like that. Maybe a tiny bit more. So, you know, use your judgment here. If you want, you can always open up a web page, look up an apple, and use it as sort of a guideline for the shape. There's a good one. Notice it is wider at the top, a little more narrow at the bottom. And I'll just kind of keep that in mind as I make this. Not a bad start. I'll go back to the front view. And of course we want to also push in the bottom a little bit. Now this is going to be probably a little smaller, so I'm going to scroll down to shrink this, and I want less of an effect here. I think that's good. Again, this is going to go in less than the top. Now let's do the hard part, which is shaping sort of the sides. There's not really a right answer for this, but one good way to do this is to go sort of loop by loop. Now remember, if you want to select the whole ring of points, then just hold on your keyboard, hold Option, and then right click, and it should go all the way around. Now it might go up, but if you just do it again, it should take you to the one you want, which is all the way around. Okay? And I'm just going to use scale to shrink that. Now again, I have that ring, So remember, it's going to control some of the other points around it. I'm going to leave that small though. And I'm just going to go kind of little by little. Do that again. Scale, slightly smaller. I'm going to left click to confirm it. I'm going to go down to the next one. Again, I'm going to hold Option and right click. And I'll just click twice. I don't want it going up and down. I want it going around. And then I'll scale that again. Remember, your shortcut for scaling is S. And I'll skip that. Again, I want this bottom to be a little bit narrower. Okay, we're getting there. Looks a little flat and short though. So I might lengthen some of these segments. Now remember, you can also select using a box. That's here in your select menu. So you can click on select, and what you want is border select. Again, the shortcut is B. And that's going to let you make a box around all of the parts that you want to select. Now, here's where this setting comes into play. If, I'll show you, if I turn that off and I try that selection, again, border select, I'm only going to get what I can see. If I turn this, notice none of those are selected. If I turn that off, and I do that, again, B is your shortcut. Then when I select that, all of them should be selected. So I'm going to push that down a bit, just to lengthen the apple a tiny bit. And I think we're getting pretty close to what we want. Alright, I think we got a pretty good apple here. I'm gonna just push this up a tiny bit more. Now obviously this is a very, very perfect symmetrical apple. That's not how things work. So one thing I can do now is just make it a little more organic. So I'm gonna push some of these points down a little bit. Again, be careful about that circle. Sometimes you're gonna want it small. Sometimes you want it big. I'll go to the other side. I'll push these down. Some of these I'll push up. And don't worry if it's not perfect. It shouldn't be. And I'll do that at the bottom too. And sometimes at the bottom, these are going to be a little bit more severe. So do your best to make that look realistic. Some of these I'm going to push down as well. Okay. Let me just see what this looks like in perspective mode. It looks pretty good for the body of an apple. Now remember that we have the ability to make this a little more round. So I'll do that now. I'm going to go to my modifiers. And, well, I'll do this first. Let me get out of edit mode. And in your tools, you should have shading. We're going to smooth this out. That should help a little bit. And also the modifier that will round this out for us, again, subdivision surface. And I'm just going to set those subdivisions to 3 and 3. Now here you can see this better. And if you want, you can go back to edit mode and make that, fine-tune that a little bit if you want to push any of these parts. I'm going to leave this as is because I think I like what I have. And remember that on your subdivision, leave this as is. After you hit your subdivisions, don't hit apply here because that's going to make your object a little bit more complicated in terms of working with. It's going to add those polygons and it's going to make that move a lot slower. So you want to leave it as is. So let's go back to object mode. We have our apple. And now I'll just create a stem. So I'm going to go back to front view ortho mode. I'm going to create a cylinder. And obviously I have to make this smaller, so I'll scale it. And I'm going to make it taller, so I'll scale it this time using just the z-axis. Remember, you can press Z while you're scaling, and that will just scale it on the z-axis. Okay, I'll put that here. Now it's a little bit stiff for my liking, and it's a little thick, so I'll shrink that down a little bit more. And what I can do with this guy, I'm going to put this in edit mode. I'm going to go to faces this time, and I'm going to select the top here. And I'm going to use extrude. So I'm going to extrude that. I'm going to come out. As I kind of move this, I'm going to rotate it a little bit just to give it a little more character. Try again. And sometimes, again, it works best to look at that from a specific angle. I'll do one more. There you go. There's our stem. Now, same thing that we do on that stem, I'm going to smooth that out, and then I'll add that subdivision surface modifier. You can choose to not use it. You know what? I don't know if I like that. So I'm going to turn that off, and I'm going to leave that as is. And one thing you can do also, here's my stem, first of all. I'm going to rename this. And here is my apple, of course. Since these are all sort of belonging to the same object, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this stem on this little icon here. I'm going to drag it over the apple, and you'll see it says drop to set parent. So what that does is it's going to make it so that whenever I move this apple, that stem is going to go with it. And now you have an apple. I'll show you how to texture that on a different file.